Erling Haaland's incredible start to Premier League football shows no sign of slowing down. He scored twice as Manchester City beat Leeds 3-1 to narrow the gap on leaders Arsenal to 5 points. Haaland became the quickest player to score 20 Premier League goals, but Pep Guardiola thinks there's even more to come from his star striker.
He missed chances, hopefully can do better, but yeah, the numbers are exceptional and it's an incredible threat for us, and always is in the right position, in the right time, and yeah, really good.
So as we mentioned, Haaland is the fastest player to score 20 Premier League goals. Just 14 matches it took him. Staggering when you consider the next best is Kalvin Phillips, who did it in 21. And to put it into context, it would have been enough for at least a share of the Premier League's Golden Boot in 5 seasons. In the last 4 seasons, no one scored more than 23. What a remarkable start it's been for Haaland at City. But, as I mentioned, Guardiola thinks there's even more to come.
I think still he's not at his best. That was in the beginning of the season, I would say, but the injury had in Dortmund a long period. When we restart to train Abu Dhabi, he could not train one single day, maybe the last one. And to move this tall body and huge body is not easy for him. But as much he can play, and minutes will be better. And even I had the feeling that it's not at his best. Guys, I'm more than satisfied, so it's not the end. But I had the feeling that in the first part of the season was a little bit sharper than it, for the reason was injured for a long time. But today played 90 minutes, against Liverpool played 75, so it's getting better. He's incredible professional. He takes care of his body and mind perfectly. He's a huge competitor, and hopefully he's enjoying playing with us.
Just 6 months ago, City signed Kalvin Phillips from Leeds for around £45 million. Last week, Guardiola claimed he'd returned from the World Cup with England overweight. Just 5 days later, Pep's view of Phillips has changed.
Yeah, he has a perfect body already. So sexy. Kalvin had been in the first part of the season out. It was surgery to arrive to the World Cup and did everything to get to the World Cup. It's not about just to be fit, or just to understand what we want to do. That's why, as quick as possible, Rodri cannot play all the games, as quick as possible going to play, but I'm happy that yesterday, for example, trained really well. I was so happy for that, and I'm pretty sure sooner or later we'll start to come in.
And talking of sexy men with a perfect body, David James is here. A very good morning. Good morning. Let's start with Erling Haaland then, who scored last week in the Cup against Liverpool, 2 more last night. And Pep Guardiola says he's not at his best, which means everyone else is in big trouble.
Yeah, good morning, first of all. What a game. I mean, obviously it's 2 goals yesterday. Jack Grealish with 2 wonderful assists. But straight away after the game, the first thing you're thinking is, would Erling Haaland himself think that he should have scored more because he had 3 one-on-ones. I think the first one was a little bit awkward for him because of the wind. But the second 2, you would have expected him to put them away. And I think he came out with a comment afterwards, and he's something along the lines that he should have scored 5. Incredible player. But he also has an incredible team around him to supply him. So you'd expect, I think, a few more goals this season from him.
Yeah, well, just a few more, yeah, because we're looking at the numbers and everyone sort of says, well, there'll maybe be a quiet period at some point in the season. But as you said, unless he gets injured because of the firepower around him and his incredible positional sense, the longer it goes on, the more you think, well, why would he have a quiet period throughout the season where he doesn't keep this incredible run of goal scoring up? Yeah,
that was say like yesterday. I mean, the interesting thing was the 3 chances which you think he was going to score 2 at least, the one-on-ones. You know, either the ball got stuck under his feet or the shot wasn't right. So there's some room for improvement. But when you've got, I mean, Jack Grealish was yesterday, but Kevin De Bruyne, who's in magnificent form at the moment, the likes of Alvarez to come back. I mean, yeah, this guy could be hitting some silly numbers.
When you talk about silly numbers, what do you think? 40, 45?
I've 38, 39 on it.
38, 39, so you're going to get a goal a game.
Well, the interesting thing is, I think yesterday was only the 2nd time this season he scored 2 away from home. The first one being West Ham, if I'm not mistaken. So most of his goals come at home. If he can improve on his away goals, then maybe it could be over 40. But you know, if he can do 38, I think he'll be doing all right.
That would be pretty decent, wouldn't it? You touched on Alvarez coming back there, and he really started the World Cup, didn't he? And I think probably surprised a lot of people, and a lot of people saw maybe linked with the price tag in the summer, that this is a guy coming in as a backup for Erling Haaland. He's better than that. Can the two of them play together?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, what I find interesting with Pep, and even when he's talking about other players there, is that Pep likes to rotate. I mean, our Haaland obviously doesn't get rotated that much, and I wouldn't think that was logical to do that. But for Alvarez, he'll have plenty of opportunities. The likes of Foden, the likes of Silva, all the other players who can score goals as well will be in part of that rotation. And he hasn't scored from outside the box, I don't think, yet, Alvarez. And when I saw him before he signed for Man City, this is a guy that would shoot from anywhere. So when he's in a happy space, I think there's going to be some interesting shooting opportunities and probably some interesting goals coming from him as well.
But it's interesting that you use that phrase happy space there as well, because that's one of the questions I guess we can ask for this season onwards, is how players come back from the World Cup and whether those who've come so close, for example, French players, it might take them a bit of time mentally to get back into it, whereas Argentinians like an Alvarez or a Romero or an Emi Martinez should be absolutely soaring when they come back to their clubs.
Yeah, you say that. I mean,
unless they've over-celebrated.
Well, it's really interesting when you go away with the international team, whether coming back to a happier place. I mean, to say you won the World Cup, you'd think that's the happiest place you could be. But if you've got a good club, then you're enjoying coming back. Then I think you can ask for sort of continued good performance. But sometimes international football is better than club football. The environment's better than club environment, and then there's a realisation that when you get back to your club, the players aren't quite so good, the environment's not so nice, and then you might see a dip in form. So, like you said, it'll be very interesting to see how certain players react. What I did love, and I have to say, was seeing Varane play for United in his first opportunity. A player that literally crawled off the field in the final, managed to get up and then play the game the other night. Other players have been sat on the bench who didn't exert themselves as much. I mean, it's all down to individuals. But
the question might have been asked as well that maybe Jack Grealish could have been introduced earlier in that World Cup quarter-final, but from a club perspective, 2 assists last night. How would you assess his overall performance?
Last night, yeah, I felt for Jack a little bit because he had, was it 3 chances in the first half? The one that he highlighted there, the ball in from Rico Lewis, which I thought was a bit bobbly. For Jack, it's a little bit too easy maybe to criticise him saying that he should score. But second half, I'm sure Pep had a good chat with him at half time. I think the goal obviously late on in that first half helped the confidence in the change room. But second half, there was setting up Haaland, there was a chance where he could have taken it on himself just to kind of get over the 3 that he didn't score in the first half. But he had a good head on him, good vision, gave it to Haaland, and I thought he had a fantastic performance in the end.
But also the second goal of Haaland's as well, which is teed up by Grealish. One of the criticisms sometimes of Jack is that he can hold on to the ball a little bit too much. But that's a first-time ball straight back into Haaland, which allows him to score the goal. Yeah, well, I think last season proved, I mean, with City winning the league as they did, Jack not being the focal point in that season. Doesn't even get on in that last game against Villa. Yeah, exactly, but he was part of the winning side. So in a sense, he'd achieved what he'd set out to do with winning the league, and I think this season's a continuation. You know, who do you fancy to score, Haaland or Jack Grealish? You saw Haaland was there, and it was a great finish as well. So, yeah, he's doing his bit. Is it a case that that's where coaching and that's where what the manager is asking him to do comes into it? Because we can all look at it and say, well, only got 1 goal and 2 assists. Should he be doing more for 100 million quid? But actually, if you watch him for 90 minutes, you're saying, OK, yeah, absolutely, Jack Grealish is contributing to this team. Yeah, I think that argument could be put to Kevin De Bruyne yesterday. I mean, anyone who's got him in his fantasy team like me would have been really frustrated because he had a fantastic game without getting the assist. But he was heavily involved in 2 of the goals to start with. And it's more about the team contribution. And Rico Lewis, a young player who's really impressing at the moment. When you watch him play, you can tell that he's been asked to do a certain role similar to that of Kyle Walker. And you could see him getting frustrated on the field because what he's been asked to do isn't quite working out with the rest of the team. So, yeah, I think what Pep's instructing them to do isn't about selfishness, except for one guy behind you, perhaps to score goals. But the rest of them is just about facilitating the win for the team. Kalvin Phillips was subjected to a few playful chants, you would say, by his former club last night. But Pep coming out afterwards and saying he's in perfect shape and he's got a sexy body. Having said last week that he'd come back from the World Cup overweight, how would you view the way this has played out in public? I think, first of all, we have to understand what context overweight is, because I'm pretty sure Sports Science and at City, if not at England,
you know, they're measuring every millimetre as opposed to 2 or 3 stone. I mean, 2 or 3 stones is a lot of weight. But,
He'd have done well to go to a World Cup and put
he
2
would've done
stone
well.
on.
Yeah, well, the food's really good apparently in the England camp. But yeah, I think he's not overweight in a normal sense. Still very fit. I mean, if he was that bad, then Pep wouldn't even put him on the bench. So I think I'll agree with Pep probably that he's got a sexy body.
Good, I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
That'll be the clickbait. David James says Kalvin Phillips is also sexy.
He's a lovely lad as well, so that's fine.
Is it maybe a sense of frustration from Pep that maybe somewhere along the line he actually didn't feel that the best thing for Kalvin Phillips was to take him to a World Cup after so little football? It's
a good point. I think from what I mean, I don't know Pep, of course, but from what I'd imagine, I think the frustration was that he didn't get the minutes. To actually let him go in the first place would have been the ideal thing, because if anyone was like me, and Pep included, that England had a good chance of going all the way, then you want to be part of that. And I think Kalvin Phillips would have needed that. But the lack of minutes probably was a frustration more than anything, because I know Pep was talking about the players that he had back at City while the World Cup was on, and how he had opportunities to work more with them. And he could have done that with Kalvin. But in the end, he's come back, City have won, and he'll get some minutes sure enough, soon enough.
Pep said it's unlikely that they're going to strengthen further in January. Do you think that Manchester City need anything if they're to retain their Premier League title and, of course, go for the holy grail that is the Champions League?
No. I mean, there's a few clubs that you could put in the bracket, but when you look at, say, likes of Rico Lewis, Cole Palmer getting a game the other day against Liverpool, they've got young players coming through with talent, not necessarily to go straight into the first team or stay in the first team, but to challenge first team places. And when you've got that kind of talent to draw on, then why spend more money, why disrupt the squad? And providing everyone's fit and Kalvin Phillips is losing some weight, they won't have any problems.
As long as he stays sexy, everything's fine.
Sexy.
Absolutely.